GCW's Fight Club 2025 was a show that had a brief window where things worked but couldn't sustain any momentum and then collapsed down the stretch with weak title matches and a finish that left you not caring about what you just watched. The structure failed here. When you open weak, get hot in the middle, and then in the end with 4 mediocre to bad matches including both your championship title matches, you definitely got problems. The show opened with a 6-way scramble between Zach Thomas, Austin Luke, Sal Mastretta, Rulo, Blackjack Mac, and Devious Cass. And this was perfectly acceptable, but also perfectly forgettable. Now Austin Luke, he won with a GTS, and I thought the pacing was fine with 6 people in the ring. But nobody stood out as good or bad. And pretty much the whole thing just existed. When you have a scramble match where everyone performs at an adequate level, but nobody separates themselves from the pack, you get exactly this. A match that fills time on the card and gives you nothing to complain about, but also nothing to remember. I gave this one just 2.5 stars. That's not how you want to open up a show. You need to set a tone, get people invested, and this didn't do that. It was just there. Things picked up though with Joey Janela versus Ryan O'Neal, which I thought was some really good stuff and the best match on the show at 3 3/4 stars. Now this was O'Neal's GCW debut, and Janela worked this like the veteran that he is. They had time to work, had good back and forth, and the crowd was into this throughout. Janela, he led the match in a way that made Ryan look better than what he was coming into the match. Janela controlled the structure, and Ryan basically followed. But Ryan also had his moments, and his offense did look solid. The crowd responded enough to chant "please come back" after this match, which tells you that Janela did his job getting this newcomer over. Janela, he hit the J-Driller for the win, and this is what you want from a veteran working with someone on their debut. You give them enough time to show what they can do and make the crowd want to see them again. This match worked because they had time and Janela knew how to structure it to maximize O'Neal's debut. One Called Manders versus Terry Yaki followed, and similar to the Janela match in terms of dynamics, the veteran was leading the way here. I gave this one 3.5 stars. This was a mix of hard hitting and adapting, and they worked well together here. The story of the match was Manders challenging Terry Yaki to bring his best throughout the match, which created some good back and forth action. Manders, he controlled things, and Terry stepped up to the challenge. Now the finishing sequence I thought was pretty solid, and Manders hit the lariat for the win. So when you have a veteran who knows how to lead a match and get the most out of his opponent, this is what you get. Solid work that delivers without being spectacular. And so now you got 2 matches in a row where experienced guys are leading newcomers or less established guys to good matches. That's the high point of this show right here. The tag team death match between Emerson Jane and Sachi Blackheart versus Beardozer I thought was fine for what it was. I gave this a solid 3 stars. They had solid structure, and they used glass, chairs, and doors, and the usual weapons you expect in this type of match. This was about violence and weapons, not about traditional wrestling, obviously. Beardozer, or Tremont in particular, hit a splash to get the win. Now, when you run a death match, the structure matters because you need to build the big spots and make the violence mean something rather than just random weapon shots. And to me, I thought they did that here for the most part. Nothing really special about this, but it accomplished what it needed to accomplish. Then things started to fall apart. KJ Orso versus Marcus Mathers I thought was just okay at 2 3/4 stars. The problem here was time. They worked fine together, but this was also forgettable. The match was getting good before it ended, which means they were building to something, but they didn't get to the finish as far as what they started with. Mathers, he won with a jackknife pin, and when you cut a match short, just as it's starting to pick up, you leave people wanting more, but not in a good way. You leave them feeling like they didn't get the match that they should have gotten here. If they had another few more minutes to work with, this could have been something way better, but they didn't, so it wasn't. The GCW World Title match was where the show really started to have problems. Effy defended against Man Like DeReiss, and this was just okay at 2.5 stars. The match never got out of that second gear. They worked okay together, but this didn't click like a way a world title match should. The finish I thought was real lame because it was just unrealistic. DeReiss, he hit Effy with a 450 splash, and then Effy immediately recovered and was just aware enough to roll up DeReiss for the pin to retain the title. This type of stuff never makes sense to me. When you take a 450 splash, you're not popping right back up to get a roll-up pin. The logic just doesn't work like that. Your world title match should be one of your best matches on the show, and this wasn't even close. This gets 2.5 stars for your world title match, and that is a problem. The GCW Tag Team Title match with GCW rules, with Brothers of Instruction and Busted in the Brain, was another disappointment for me at 2.75 stars. The execution of this could have been better, and the match wasn't really escalating enough, which is a major problem when you're doing a hardcore match. You need to build and build until you get to the big spots. The Brothers of Instruction I thought were okay, but nothing special. And Busting the Brain I thought was fine, but this wasn't one of their better performances. When you've seen better matches from a team, especially Busting the Brain, that tells you that they didn't bring their best here. Now, Busting the Brain, they hit a double face plant to win the titles, and this was just basically a hardcore match that didn't escalate properly and had execution problems at times. A title change, that's acceptable, but disappointing, given what the teams had, is not the way to go. Shane Mercer versus Mr. Danger in an NGI qualifying death match needs to have some context here. These guys were in a War Games match with Glass the previous night, so obviously they were banged up. So with this match, I gave this one 2.5 stars. This was shorter, and they mainly used light tubes, and Mr. Danger won with a Phoenix Splash on light tubes, but he barely got all of it, and it was basically botched. So when you're working back-to-back nights and you already got through Glass in a War Games match, you're not going to be at your best. Now, if these guys were fresh, this probably would have been a much better match. The rating of this reflects the way of what they were able to do given their conditions, not what they're capable of when they're at full strength. The show ended with a 6-man tag death match between Charles Mason, Cruel, and Slade versus Vandal 48. That got 2.5 stars, and I didn't care for any of this. The feud itself has nobody to cheer for and nobody to get invested in, which kills the match before it even starts. Even if you're doing heel versus heel, you need to make up for it with some good to great match quality. And this match was just very average. The deathmatch elements were typical, nothing special, and Mason's team won with a modified hook face plant, but the match was just there. Nothing seemed to really click for me. When you have a feud where there's no babyface to root for and heels aren't interesting enough to watch, you need the wrestling to be exceptional to overcome that problem. And unfortunately, this wasn't exceptional. This was an average death match that pretty much had no emotional investment for me. And that's how you end the show. This show had 9 matches. 6 of them were rated 2.75 stars or below. Only 2 matches exceeded 3 stars. Both championship matches were disappointing. The show ended with 4 weak matches in a row. The average match quality is around 2.75 stars. Nothing was actively terrible or unwatchable, but mostly this was just mediocre to weak with a brief, strong stretch in the middle that couldn't carry the rest of the show. Not really ideal for me. I get this a 6.25 out of 10. Not recommended.